the Russian naval assets are just docked on the outskirts of the country. And this could be a severe blow to Russia's just broader maritime strategy and presence in the Eastern Med and Africa, and therefore towards Ukraine. So how do you think Putin and his broader sort of inner circle...
I'm going to tell you, it's a huge blow for Putin. Two major goals were natural gas from Kuwait, Qatar, and Iran does not flow into Europe, competing with Russian natural gas. And the more recent goal is to use Russian bases in Syria as a tool to increase its geopolitical influence, to show the world that he is still the leader of a great power. He's trying to establish Russia as the leader of BRICS on one hand. So I think Putin is mad because he's lost. African leaders might think of him not as highly as before, things like that.
This is The Global Gambit.
How you going, everybody? It is time for another episode, and we're being rejoined by Konstantin of Inside Russia, the incredibly important YouTube channel and very authentic, I think, perspective of someone who was in Russia and then left early on into the war in Ukraine and has been a strong advocate, a strong activist and critic of Putin and the Kremlin's war against Ukraine and just generally sort of the direction that Russia goes. And we had a very, I think, wholesome part one episode a couple of weeks ago about Konstantin's actual personal experiences. And this time, though, I wanted to have his more sort of academic and professional takes on the war in Ukraine. And maybe we'll touch upon Syria as well and sort of Putin's fallout on Assad. But we'll see. So lots coming up in this episode. And if you enjoy it, then, drop a comment below or share your perspectives. It's always nice to hear from the community. So, Konstantin, there's a lot going on, I think, and maybe I would just be interested to hear your perspective about Putin's strategy at the moment, because he's clearly not got control of things. Whilst the war is not exactly going easy for Ukraine, it's certainly not going the way that the Kremlin desires, and now with the setbacks of Syria. So what do you think Putin is thinking of?
It's really hard to talk about his strategy because he keeps his strategy to himself. Okay, and at most of times, whatever he's doing does not look logical, cannot be explained from, by using regular logic. Russia economically is struggling. The Russian economy is not sustainable. It cannot go functioning like this for a very long time. It's getting increasingly bad. It's getting worse. My estimation, this perfect storm that is above Russian economy right now, it's spinning above Russia, and it's not going anywhere. Okay, it's just increasing in speed. My estimation. Current circumstances of Russian economy, it can last for 4 to 5 months. And then things will get very, very bad. I don't know exactly what might happen. For example, the elites will be standing up. People will be asking questions. Perhaps power clans will be fighting. And that definitely anything that happens will shake the regime, okay? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't make any sense what he's doing. Instead of fixing the economy, he's spending more money waging the war, and, nothing is done in terms of decent policies to fix the economy. So, but if we look from a different angle, okay, what Vladimir Putin needs now, it definitely can save him, is peace or ceasefire. He needs a break. He needs a way out. He needs to stop the war, plain and simple. And then he needs to concentrate on internal matters. And I think his strategy right now, all the efforts, all the resources are aimed at the upcoming negotiations with Donald Trump. He's trying to get as much land as possible in Ukraine to get himself a lever, He's at the future negotiations. He's trying to push Ukrainians out of Kursk province. That's another possible advantage. And all the resources are aimed at that, okay? And the rest of Russia, society, the economy is simply disregarded now. I think that's what's going on. So basically, if he wins, if his strategy works out, then there will be peace. Then he will come to a certain of agreement with Ukraine, and the soldiers might come back. There will be a ceasefire, and then he'll turn towards Russia and said, "Okay, we won. Now let's take care of things internal, domestic." If he doesn't succeed, then it's either win or die situation for him, I think.
Well, it's certainly with the events in Syria, as I said, I'll mention it a bit because it is very hot. We've done a lot on the channel about it, but it's not looking great. He's got a strategical blunder in the form of those bases that he's having to sort of negotiate with rebels, and the economy is overheating, and the developments on the Eastern Front. I mean, do you not think it's a bit pointless, Konstantin, to sort of look at there's a lot of military analysts or armchair analysts who sort of talk about each time Russia takes a field, or they literally secure another barnyard, and it's sort of like, oh, Russia's making gains. But in the grander scheme of things, Russia's really controlled about the same 18-20% of Ukraine's territory since the February 22 and after the remarkable counteroffensive in September of that year. So, is it how will Putin try to sell this, right? That he's taken back the historical lands of Russia, Novorossiya, or something like that, and that's sufficient to the Russian people, despite the fact that they've been fighting for 2 years and not much has changed on the battlefield?
Pyotr, I think the whole situation right now is a huge mess, because definitely nothing is going according to Putin's plan. His plan was was in and out, to take Ukraine in a couple of weeks, install a puppet president, puppet government, and get out of there. I think that's what the plan was, but it was a bad mistake. Okay,
I agree with you.
Once he started the war, everything went sideways, and now he's not doing anything strategical. He's not using strategy. He's using tactics. Okay, taking those kilometers of Ukrainian land, of course, there's nothing strategic and important about that. Taking back Russian lands, oh, give me a break. Who cares? Those not Russian land. Everyone knows about that. No one cares, okay? People are so sick of the war. They're so sick of falling economy. That's the last thing on their mind, those lands. It's just he can't go back. He can't turn his troops and send them back because, hey, he's going to face lots of questions. And the biggest question is, why the heck did you even start this war? Why did you go to Ukraine? And now you just, pulled back just like that? Why? And then he will have to answer those very uncomfortable questions. Okay, and what he's doing by those so-called experts or analysts, they blow up these victories out of proportion. Oh, Russia captured another town, and the town is like 600 people, and
I was going to say 6, but yeah,
30 or 40. Well, that's a village. That's what they call the very important strategic village. Okay, so that's six houses. 12 people. Yeah. The thing is, they gotta show something to Russian people, because if they don't, again, there will be questions, and then they're showing, look, we're victorious. We captured this. No residents, but we captured it. Okay, this is the victory. No one is talking about the number of residents, the number of houses, the importance. It's just the symbol what matters. Answering your question. This is why he's doing it. He's stuck. He's in Zugzwang. If you play chess, you know that this situation is where every single move, any move you make, lands you into a worse position. So he's been in constant Zugzwang in Ukraine since 2022, since March. And he's simply doing whatever he can.
Yeah, I mean, there's an expression that I've always used and sort of thought I made up a few years back, but sort of Putin's got a great poker face, but his chess game is shit. And I think that the war has only illustrated that very clearly. But we talk about his vulnerabilities, yet nothing seems to happen, right? I'm going to be devil's advocate, I think, because it's good for balance in that regard. And, I think the extremities or over zealous sort of predictions by some is applicable to both sides, right? We've got people who say that Russia's going to collapse tomorrow. It's very popular on YouTube to say that China's about to implode because of their economic challenges. Every country has relative challenges. I certainly think Russia's are worse than the pro-Kremlinites like to make out. But equally, is Putin so at the precipice of being sort of, removed or replaced, or he's at really, because this is why he's so successful, because he's managed to purge and completely control the entire Russian system, right? This propaganda machine that he has created over 25 years of governing, quote unquote, the country, and he's seen as a Tsar, not really a president. So, is it really that easy just to think about Putin being that vulnerable?
He's been the Tsar for the past 24 years. He's outslid, outsmarted, outran, outcompeted, casted out so many people, perhaps hundreds, if not thousands of people, because to get on top is much easier than to stay on top, and Putin has been successfully doing that. Okay, there have been situations where I personally thought, this is it. This is the beginning of the end for Putin. Remember last year, Prigozhin mutiny, very successful mutiny. Vladimir Putin stood in front of the entire country looking small, scared. His hands were shaking. His eyelid was going up and down erratically. And he was asking for help from Russian people. Unite behind me. These bandits are moving on to Moscow. And then he fled. He ran away. The leader of the country. And then I thought, this is it. It shows that he is not the strongest in the pack anymore, and others will be noticing. And the situation was pretty bad for him. But you know what? He managed to bounce back. He managed to return. Then at the end of 2022, he was nowhere to be seen for 2 months. And Russia was losing, clearly. It lost Kherson. It was kicked out of Kharkov province. And, again, it was a situation where his chair was shaking underneath him. Again, he bounced back. He's the master of bouncing back, the genius of bouncing back. Okay, so it's really hard. I think it's wrong to say that he's still strong. He's still in the chair. He's still the Tsar. Okay, and Russia collapsing. What is collapsing? We got to get things straight. A lot of people, I hear this word, Russia is collapsing. I use it myself, but I always clarify. I don't think Russia will collapse, because Russia will continue to exist. Just China will continue to exist, no matter what, okay? The economy might collapse, and it is collapsing, okay? But it doesn't mean that, Russia will stop living and the Russians will all of a sudden disappear, okay? Collapse means that the living standard of regular people will be so much lower, okay? But that collapse is not a concern of Vladimir Putin. If we look at a little different angle, because most people are making this mistake, right? We're looking at Russia from the point of view of a Russian citizen. Russia is collapsing. The interest rate is going up. Russian ruble has lost 27% of its value in 3 months. The printing press is on. Okay, inflation is 30%. Unemployment is 2.0%, which is a catastrophe, right? That is a collapse, or at least this is the beginning of a collapse. Now, let's think as if we were Putin. I'm still the czar. I still have the army. I control it. The generals, they still answer me. I don't have any opposition. I don't have any other strong men in Russia. I've taken care of everyone. No one is trying to take me down to get my chair. Okay, the war in Ukraine is going on. Russian economy, I don't care about Russian economy. I don't care. People don't say anything in Russia. They are obedient. They have not asked me one single question. And everything I say they do, and everything I do, they approve. And so everything is going kind of good. And now I will talk to Trump in a few weeks, and I'll find a solution of some kind. And that will solidify, not solidify, but that will help me to hang on to my power. Reinforce my power and then my position. So it's been 24 years. We might as well stay for another few years. So 100% absolute success. I mean, well, think about it.
No, for sure. I think there's no denying that.
His success is power. His failure is loss of power. That's very simple. Everything he does aims at him hanging onto his power, absolute power, for longer. That's it.
Well, yeah, that goes without saying. I think that the estimation is that he could run again until 2036 based on the current constitution. And I mean, yeah, the collapsing thing, well, as a YouTuber, I think you appreciate sometimes we use it in our own titles because it, breeds intrigue and drama, right?
I use it too.
I certainly get that. Yeah, exactly.
I use it too, yes.
Yeah.
But I explain, I don't like clickbaits. I explain always.
Yeah, of course. No, it's a balance. You can use fire emojis and caps and shock and awe, but also you can have an intense sounding title, but it's not too good. It's clickbait and clickbait, right? Good and bad, I think. But one of the questions then I therefore have you in the time that I've studied Russia and done it in my degrees and stuff is the idea of Putin's we've always thought, I think, that he was a strategist. He was cold. He wasn't driven by symbolism or ideology. He was pragmatic and largely materialistic or whatever, focusing on maximizing Russia's usage of oil or being able to control the commodities in eastern Ukraine or gas supplies or something like that. Monopolization, right? But clearly after he wrote that rather bizarre article in 2021, it became clear that he is driven by historical association, legacy, symbolism, etc. So have we in the West fundamentally misunderstood Putin, or he's just changed over the years and it culminated in the invasion in 2022?
It was ever changing. If you remember young Putin in his early years, he was totally pro-West. He was giving interviews saying that the Russian national idea was to join NATO and become part of the West, the Western culture, the Western economy, the Western society, And then that started changing in 2005, 2006, but he still was pro-West. And then, of course, things changed when he came back for the third term in 2012. And things have been changing since. He's been deteriorating.
Yeah, we had a guest on called Mark Galliotti, and we talked about the different mindsets, the different phases that Putin's had. You could talk about the early 2000s and then the Munich conference of 2007, where you maybe see the first change. Then after sort of the snow revolution, as they call it in the West, when all those protests against him in Moscow and St. Petersburg. And then obviously Crimea and also COVID. Do you think he gets more senile or paranoid as he get older, or it's just a case that everyone goes that direction, but it's been worse for him because of events like the attempted mutiny or something?
Pyotr, it's really hard to say because me and you, we're trying to think about it as regular people. Okay, he's not a regular person. He is the center of the absolute power over a very large country, very rich country, and he controls, the nuclear weapons. He's a big part of the geopolitical game in the world. he's. I think that he's thinking differently. Not in the categories me and you think. Okay, I think that his power has been changing him, and he's clearly not the same that he used to be. And but I don't think he's an exception, because great power changes people. I mean, we've seen the examples in the history many times.
I thought you were about to do the quote from Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, but
That's a cliche. That's a cliche.
Yes, precisely. So when he then has major setbacks, like Syria, for example, and again, I appreciate you're not necessarily a Syria experienced guy, but he's now lost 2 major bases in the west of the country. It's still up in the air whether or not they're going to be able to keep them. But right now, the Russian naval assets are just docked on the outskirts of the country, which is not great for maintenance, need of use if they have to do something in Africa or just whatever, right? And this could be a severe blow to Russia's just broader maritime strategy and presence in the Eastern Med and Africa, and therefore towards Ukraine. So how do you think Putin and his broader sort of inner circle react to those sorts of situations? I appreciate we're just civilians on the outside, but as someone who follows this as extensively as you do, he's going to try and frame this to the Russian people in a way that it looks good, that it's all under control, or is he just going to sort of redirect their attention? Deflection sort of thing.
Now I'm going to surprise you, okay? First of all, I'm going to tell you it's a huge blow for Putin. And he had quite a few goals by placing Russian military bases in Syria. I think that, again, I'm not a huge expert, but I think that 2 major goals were, number 1, to make sure that natural gas from Kuwait, Qatar, in Iran does not flow into Europe, competing with Russian natural gas through Nabucco pipeline in Turkey. And that was in the talks a long time ago, about 20 years ago. And that's why Vladimir Putin bailed out Bashar al-Assad, who promised him, obviously, certain things, including to block construction of the pipeline. Okay. And the more recent goal is to use Syria, Russian bases in Syria, as a tool to increase its geopolitical influence, to show the world that he is still the leader of great power. Russia, he thinks Russia is a great power. And Russia has been using those bases in the last few years as a logistics hub for its operations in Africa, in a few countries that Russia has reached out to and, influencing right now. So losing the bases, I mean, there are other reasons too, but I think those are the major ones. And losing the bases is a huge blow. He's trying to establish Russia as the leader of BRICS on one hand, and, hosting world leaders in Kazan in Russia, and, showing everyone that he is the host of such event, the organizer, trying to boost his image, his influence. On the other hand, everyone sees that he loses his military, flees and runs, and he loses military bases, and his vassal, Bashar al-Assad, is basically kicked out of his own country and finds refuge in Moscow. So I think Putin is mad at this, but again, that's my personal guess. Definitely not happy. And this is one less point to negotiate, one less ace in the hole, so to speak, with the negotiations that are upcoming in January, I believe.
We'll turn to those negotiations, I think, at the end.
I'm going to surprise you now, okay? Because I've told you what I think, how it looks from the outside, but this is how it looks for Putin, okay?
Right.
Yes, he's mad because he's lost. He's mad that the African leaders might think of him not as highly as before, things like that. But in terms of Russian military, who cares? How many soldiers are there? 7,000? They're dispensable. Just forget about them. Ships? Well, they're not in Ukraine anyway. They cannot go to Ukraine. They cannot stop in European ports. They have to go all the way through the north of Russia, and they're not needed there. Let them just float. Okay, the planes, we have many planes. So this is how he thinks, I think, about this. Is not a huge blow in terms of military might of Russia, because it wasn't used in Ukraine anyway. So this is I think that's what his take on this loss of the base and military power of 2 bases in Syria.
Interesting. Do you not think that? Well, it's certainly from my perspective a punch to Russia's power projection, right? We talk about great power competition, but Russia's ability to be the overarching quote unquote great power within the Middle East has certainly been set back, I think, and Turkey is certainly taking advantage of that.
It's over.
You think
Turkey
it's completely
won, Russia
over?
lost. Well, that's getting there. I'm not sure if it's completely over, but I think it's fairly close to being completely
But what
over.
about? Do you think Russia could they could what's the word? They could reposition them in Libya. That's one potential area. There's a couple of ports down there. Russia's got decent relations with Libya, which I can't remember if General Haftar is still in control. He's one of the main rebel, sort of main opposition to the transitional government in Libya. So do you think the Russians could try to just reorientate their focus and still maintain some degree of influence in the Middle East, albeit on the outside, and more focus on North Africa?
They certainly can try. They can try, but you know the story of General Haftar, right?
No, tell me.
You know how he lived in the United. You know how he lived in the United States. He was a refugee. He was advising people in Pentagon. For a couple decades, I think. He has a nice house. He was part of a U.S. military, and then when Muammar Gaddafi was gone, he just got up and went and became the leader of the rebels, of the new government or whatever. So he's not. I wouldn't trust General Haftar in like allying with Russia. I mean, he allies today. Who knows what he does tomorrow? So, and Libya.
Okay.
I know less about Libya than about Syria, but from what I understand, the country is in chaos. And there are different militarized groups controlling the country or trying, like, fighting with each other constantly. Okay, so this is my understanding.
Yeah,
Can
Libya
Russia
is a very sad
establish a
situation.
naval base? Yes. Can Russia try to establish the chances of it? I mean, slim to none. But that time will tell. Let's see what happens next. But I wouldn't bet on that.
Yeah, I think Libya is basically what we want to avoid happening in Syria, and after the Arab Spring, when Gaddafi was ousted and found in that drainage pipe, I believe, the country's been in a state of civil war. It never got to the same level of intensity as Syria's, but because there was less external influence. But it's certainly been the inability for them to hold elections. They've been trying to for years. General Haftar controls the east of the country, and the UN-backed transitional unity government, whatever it's called, controls the west and Tripoli. But yeah, it's basically, you've seen videos, I think, of Libyans saying, don't make the same mistakes we did to Syrians, which I hope that Syria can come out, regardless of who's leading it. I'm not endorsing any particular candidate or anything. I really want Syria not to to continue to suffer as it has. But on this question then of sort of Russia's ability to pull rank, if you like, with the Chinese and the Americans, for example. So how sustainable is that? It kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. And I do want to touch upon the negotiations after that. But Russia always tries to, from my perspective, pull rank with China and the US. US is obviously overarchingly much more powerful. China is, got the economy size. And Russia's now spending, 45% of its GDP on or a quarter, a third, whatever it is, on military expenditure alone, which is insane. So, when's that going to come to bite Russia in the ass, in Putin in the ass? How long do you think this can continue?
4 or 5 months. It can continue as long as Russian economy is holding together. And
Right.
I estimate it has 4 to 5 months left. The problem is Putin and Russian government, well, we say Putin, we mean the propaganda and the government, and everyone repeats after Putin. Okay, that the idea is Russia is as great as China in the United States, and Russia is building a multipolar world. Okay, and Russia is trying to build that with BRICS. It's just China doesn't know about that. Okay, China also wants dual polar world where there's the United States and China, but Russia is not in the picture. The thing is, Russia has nothing to offer except for the nukes, and that's it. But the nukes, the Chinese have more nukes than the Russians do, and the Americans also have more nukes than the Russians do. It's not an exclusive advantage that Russia has. Other than that, it doesn't have anything. Economy, give me a break. It's fallen apart. You can't, compare the Chinese economy to Russian economy. It's madness. And Putin is trying to play this game. Oh, we're as great, and we can work together, we can coexist together, and they have to listen to Russia. This is going to end soon because Russia is literally falling apart. China is, I don't know, it's using Russia. It will use in the future. Russia has lots of resources that the Chinese need. Russia has people that Chinese might use, if they decide to. What else Russia has to offer? I don't know. You tell me, perhaps, as a geopolitical expert, because I don't know.
Well, I think that when you talk about great power theory, the idea is that there are different types of great power, but in Russia's case, it has the most amount of active nuclear warheads, and therefore, by extension, it is a great power because only a few handful of countries have such capability. Also, because it's such a big country, just sheer territorial size means it has to be given respect and attention. Its amount of resources, people argue it's a very wealthy country and therefore that's a lot that it can offer. But if you're talking about an economy or a world that's shifting away towards, zero carbon, renewables, then Russia suddenly doesn't have as much of a leverage in terms of oil and gas. I think there's some pushback against that now. The appetite at COP was not exactly great. So I think Russia has relevance in certain context, but the nuclear element, as you've just basically alluded to, it's a very context specific aspect, isn't it? How useful are nukes? Not much, other than to be seen as a very scary thing. So I agree with you. So I think Russia has stuff to offer, but because of the way that Putin has governed and essentially extracted so much from the country in terms of knowledge, human capital, right? How many people have fled or been indoctrinated by his propaganda? The productivity and potential of Russia is not being fully realized. I'm not saying that it has to follow a Western model to do that, but it's certainly not, Putin deliberately undermines it a little bit, because if he didn't, then there would be more people aware that he's not doing the best for the country as other people might. So, I agree with you. But do you think, therefore, in come negotiations, right, you seem very confident that these are going to happen and is going to be some kind of deliverable, some kind of product. But, can we really expect Putin to follow through genuinely? Or if he tries to screw Trump over, Trump could turn around and, be like, okay, you tried to cheat me. I don't like that in business. I'm going to support Ukraine even more. So do you think, though, that if Putin gets a little bit too, provocative, it could backfire on him disastrously, no?
We are trying to predict things that I personally have no clue about. What I am sure, there will be some kind of negotiations. There will be. There are so many signs pointing that.
No, for sure.
Russian politicians have started conditioning Russian people, and I know that for sure. I have insights that the end of the so-called special military operation is a victory. Okay, so the senior, like, vice governors from every province are summoned to Moscow, and they're participating in seminars. Okay, and they are taught how to build this system of propaganda in their provinces to convince Russians that the end of this war, the SVO, is actually victory, and how all the goals achieved victoriously. Okay, and this is just one among many signs here in there in Russia. Another reason why I'm so sure that there will be some kind of negotiations is, like I said, all resources right now, everything that Putin has, are thrown to gain as much leverage as possible. Okay,
as we say in the business, there needs to be an off ramp, and Putin, I think, needs it more than ever. But as I've always pointed out as well, it's impossible for Trump to be so confident that he can secure a deal when he hasn't even got them in the same room to begin negotiating, right? It's all well and good talking about delivering something, but if you haven't even started these negotiations, let alone trying to get them to agree something, give off this, give up that, concessions here, over there, we'll have to have you back to break this down again. But as always, it's a pleasure. And everyone, if you enjoyed the conversation, spasibo. And as we say on the show, everyone, you've either got to get playing or be played. So wish peace of mind and take care.